So I wanted to explain a little bit about religious fundamentalism. Religious fundamentalism has been an issue put by our partners on Arrow's strategic plan for 10 years. It is not often easy for us to pin down religious fundamentalism as one of the causes that holds back achievement in gender equality, especially with regards to sexual and reproductive rights realization for a number of groups of people who may be left out of, who are marginalized, basically, right, for different reasons. Now I'm just actually trying to figure out, oh, the next one is this way. Phew, okay. So firstly, I thanked Sundri for actually putting this topic to us because generally we do not perceive religion as being a structural driver, right? For many of us who see achievements in health and especially sexual and reproductive health, we are aware of structural drivers of poverty. We are aware of inequality as being one of the drivers of inequity. However, I wanted to say that religion is considered as a factor which influences individual choices and left within the personal realm. Right? In the past, an individual's choices stemming from their own understanding of religion, such as a choice not to undergo tubal ligation, vasectomy, or a choice not to perform abortion services, often considered as a conscientious objection by service providers, or even an institution claiming a religious identity. For example, certain hospitals do not offer abortion services. In the past, have not been interrogated, i.e., should religion be a factor at all when making health decisions? So what then happens when there is a social process that is experienced in our societies when the state itself starts professing a religious identity? So, and by and large, across different countries, we see a number of states adopting a national religious identity. For example, the emergence of a Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu country is a relatively new phenomena which has implications for health equity across the region. Okay. So generally, structural drivers are defined as institutions, compositions, processes adopted by institutions, programs and policies adopted by institutions in order to carry out their work and what that work itself entails. Religious fundamentalism refers to concerted efforts to bring back religion as a determinant in policy making, and who are groups likely to be affected by such an effort. So fundamentalism is often interpreted as the fundamentals of religion, okay, which also needs to be further interrogated, though most often considered as a personal choice. So how prevalent is this phenomena? And I wanted to assure you all, India, you're not alone. So this was a cartoon published in a newspaper in the beginning of the year, which says, like, you know, is this year going to be Hindu, is it going to be Muslim, or is it going to be secular, right? In the past, countries professed secular democracy as the way ahead. But today, nations are adopting national religions in order to propel themselves to the 21st century. And you can see the emergence of the Buddhist Sri Lanka, a Buddhist Myanmar, a Hindu India, a Muslim Malaysia, or a Muslim Indonesia, or a Muslim Bangladesh. Okay, and religion is perceived as a critical shaper of national cultural identity in this globalized world. This perspective is often very simplistic and denies the diverse composition of religions in each country that we all started off with even during the post-independence when our constitutions were formed. Okay, in a number of countries, the national religion is affiliated most often with a dominant majority racial or ethnic group, and India perhaps caste. Right? So the strident call of these groups is a return to majoritarian patriarchal politics guised under democracy. Right? So one of the things is, well, if we are the majority religion, then we should be able to make our religion the source of all policy making in this country, or that our country needs to adopt this religious identity. So equality of women, of citizens who belong to ethnic and religious minorities, and of sexual minorities, and acceptance of diversity are all singled out as threats to the majority. Okay? Interestingly, this phenomena is apparent across continents, races, and religions. So in a number of countries, there are calls to revise the constitution to recognize this religious identity. And part of this call to strengthen the religious identity within the constitution is also to ensure that all other articles of the constitution are compatible with this identity. This can be seen in India, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, right? In some countries, governments are specifically charged to recognize and protect the role of religion. In the Malaysian constitution, Islam is the religion of the federation. And this is what fundamentalist parties actually say. Now, everything else, because the constitution says Islam is the religion of the federation, all other articles of the constitutions which are not compatible with this, including the rights of minorities and the rights of minorities to profess and practice their religion freely, needs to be compatible with this, right? In the Sri Lankan constitution, I think of the 70s, and I believe there was an amendment that they were discussing last year, but I'm not sure how it was finalized. But in the Sri Lankan constitution, it says, it shall be the duty of the state to protect and foster Buddhism. Right? So besides an aligning of other constitutional articles in line with this identity, the debate also emerges that all other policies, processes, and practices should be in line with this religious identity. So, what is the impact on health equity? In the past of SRHR, we can see that the impact of religious fundamentalisms has clearly been seen in the three key areas, right? And causing a number of groups to fall out. Or did I say three areas and then I made four? Okay. Access to safe abortion access to safe abortion services, spousal consent for long-acting methods of contraception, access to sexual and reproductive health services for young unmarried people, and people with a different sexual orientation and gender identity. These are the trademark issues that help blur the lines between morality issues and rights issues for further implications on other topics. So generally, if any argumentation needed to be made on whittling down on women's agencies, women's decision-making, these are the four topics that the right wing would bring up. Okay? And surprisingly, there is much consensus amongst the different religions on these topics. And I think this was a cartoon that came out in India at the time of discussion of 377. So all religions, despite the fact that they may fight against each other and try to battle for supremacy, but actually quite in agreement with the fact that they are against homosexuality. So access to safe abortion, what does the issue really do, right? So if you are a consumer of social media, you would have seen that social media is being used extensively to talk about, this fully formed baby in the womb, which is saying, please don't kill me. And, so the thing is, access to safe abortion, the discussions or the discourse prioritizes religious understanding on what the beginning of life is over the life and choices of women, and prioritizes that the key social function of women is reproduction compared to other functions. The second one is when we talk about access to comprehensive sexuality education and access to sexual and reproductive health services for young unmarried people, then when the debate is silenced, we reinforce the idea that the purpose of sex is primarily for procreative reasons and within the institution of marriage, and sex outside of marriage is considered immoral, right? So this is the prevailing viewpoint. With people for different sexual orientation and gender identity, again, right, because their sex is not procreative, it is not heterosexual, it is not within the framework of marriage, it is then again considered an abhorrence. Okay, so this is the same thing that, again, these lines of what is morality, what is right, as compared to what is the right, okay, has further implications on the other topics. And we can already see that certain groups are disadvantaged here, right? There are specific groups that are being disadvantaged. Women, young people, people of different sexual orientation and gender identity. However, we have other implications later on, we'll see. In the current context, Okay, religion is seen as deciding factors in, if you have followed the debates, early age marriage. So there's a lowering of the age of marriage for girls in Iran to 13, and Bangladesh marry with the permission below age 18 without any qualification of what exactly is the lowest denominator supposed to be, right? And this is a new law. These are both new laws. Spousal consent for long-acting methods of contraception, that women's wombs belong to not themselves but to their husbands, right? And this is, though it is not, it may not be in India, I'm not sure, but definitely it is in the Muslim majority countries. In FGM, the medicalization of female circumcision. Now, the connection with the health issue, right? So in order to reduce the health risk, both Malaysia and Indonesia choose to put this within the medical setting rather than look at it as a rights issue, right? And they choose not to report it as an indicator of the SDGs, and it is connected to being seen as a religious obligation and cultural right. We'll come back to this a bit later, right? Okay. And then, of course, the last one, which is emergency contraception, wrongly seen as an abortifacient in the Philippines and in many parts of the world as well. The Philippines took 12 years to pass a reproductive health law, which again, religious groups put the barrier, asking the Department of Health to go through a judicial process of certifying every single contraceptive as not being an abortifacient, because, and it's ridiculous because a contraceptive isn't an abortifacient to start off with, but just as a delay, right? So we can see whether the topic is early age marriage, a delay in access to safe abortion services, a delay in accessing contraceptive services. The ones that actually suffer from this changes in the laws or the delays in the implementation of the laws are actually the poorest and most vulnerable group who continue to be affected. Yeah. So this is a part of I think one of the things that appeared in the Philippines, right? We're not dispensing birth control because we don't believe in it, and well, why don't we do away with medicine and just pray? Because if you're really a good person with good faith background, you should be praying and your prayers will be answered, right? So we also need to interrogate that this religious identity is one based on othering. Okay, across different countries, rights of minorities are very much affected in the religious fundamentalist discourse. You can find, if you consider reproductive rights, in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, these are two countries that have actually placed a two-child law for Muslims within their country, right? And then if you consider LGBT rights, LGBT seen as undermining Islam, and specific stances by Malaysia, Indonesia, and Bangladesh by militant mobs to harass, kill, and threaten LGBT groups. Indonesia, very recently, at the end of last year, you had a very conservative group which tried to take a petition to ban gay and extramarital sex in the court system, right? It was narrowly defeated, okay, so they were by 5-4. But knowing the zeal and the vigor of fundamentalist groups, we are quite sure they will try this again next year. So the other you have is you will consider marriage rights. In Myanmar, the government also passed a law prohibiting mixed marriages. And in Malaysia, in order to marry a Muslim, you should first convert to Islam. And then in India, you had this case of a 24-year-old grown woman who converted to Islam to marry, but then the Supreme Court decided that she needed to go back home to her the charge of her parents until she was properly married off by her parents. And then, of course, you can consider child rights as well. So registration of children of mixed union is not compatible with other conditions, is difficult, right? And children are not able to choose a religion for themselves, but are bestowed a religious identity upon birth itself within the registration system. In Malaysia, we have this very weird case of illegitimate children. So if you are a child born to a Muslim couple within 6 months of marriage, okay, within 6 months of marriage, you are not registered to the father. Okay, so it is not whether you were born when your parents were married, but were you conceived when your parents were married, which is like it is like one of the most cruel things that you can do, because you can have brothers and sisters of the same parents going to school, right? And their classmates mock them because why do you have? So they can choose one of the 100 names of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad. And the general one used is bin Abdullah, right? So you have it is a number of fathers have taken the National Registration Department to court over this, but it is just for me mind-boggling that National Registration Department as a government institution, okay, and officers who are doing the registration are actually playing a sort of moral guardianship of like, when did you actually conceive this child? You know, so it's, yeah. Often when we discuss religious fundamentalisms, groups say this returns to a notion of fundamentals. So some feminist groups and women's rights groups work with religious organizations, and when you have this debate on should we call it conservatism, should we call it fundamentalism, and they say, well, it's a return to fundamentals, right? And it's very interesting because what constitutes the fundamentals of a religion can vary from person to person, right? So some people say, oh, my religion is actually about compassion and acceptance. And some people say, well, actually, I think your religion is about, whether you eat meat or not, right? But certain fundamentals of religion definitely need interrogation, right? And the first is the view that men and women are complementary and not equal. This occurs across all religions. It advocates separate work, right? There's the work of the females, and then there's the work of the males, okay? And this work, of course, is equated with separate spheres, okay? And transgressing these spheres is closely monitored. So in a number of places, like for example, there are curfew laws in Aceh, which say women must go back before 9 o'clock and be inside the house, or you're going to be fined as a sex worker, because only women who do sex work are outside of the house at 9 p.m. at night. Then you have cross-dressing, right? So if you, in one particular state, the religious authorities caught a number of transgender persons and fined them for cross-dressing. So in the first round, they actually, a lawyer took the religious authority to court. I'm assuming that this notion of religious authority may be quite foreign to you, but never mind, with such wide powers, but let me come back to that, okay. So the lawyer took this religious authority to court, and the High Court actually ruled and said, no, freedom of expression includes the right to cross-dress, okay, but in this, our version of the Supreme Court, it was overturned, saying that actually the cross-dressing is not included in this freedom of expression. So then women are the sex needing protection, and their decisions need reiteration of male members in marriage, entering into contracts, health decisions, dress codes, and guardianship laws. So yeah, so this is another, like you have religion and women's rights. Okay, so that religion, religious books, and religious edicts are the highest source of truth, and in comparison to everything else, academic studies, medical studies, demographic and epidemiological studies, for example, we need to, access to contraception needs to be approved by fatwa committees, and then female circumcision is the issue that I was mentioning before, where the Ministry of Health in Malaysia actually said something to the effect of, well, it's not in accordance with the religious scriptures that I know. This is what what happened was a hospital director took this initiative by the Ministry of Health and took it to the Fatwa Committee, and then the Fatwa Committee said, actually, we think it is compulsory according to the religion, and made it almost binding for everyone. So the Ministry of Health could not make a move without getting approval from the Fatwa Committee. So religion has become the source of public policy making. That the religion needs to be defended and protected in both personal and political spaces, whether it's from food consumption, whether it's a consumption of beef in India or consumption of pork in Malaysia, to young couples dating, moral policing, girls' dressing and behavior, to laws and policy. So the right of culture and religion supersede that over that of the individual's agency, and this needs to be dismantled. That religion belongs in the personal realm and cannot be critiqued. So this is what our past thinking has been, right? However, this is actually needs to be regarded as a conscious political move by certain parties to establish religious bodies, religious schools, religious health services, religious authorities, religious laws, and religious courts, which embody, implement, and carry out actions based on these interpretations. There's an entire social, economic, and legal system premised on religion, which espouses separation, purity, ritual, and fundamentalism. Hence, the phenomenon needs to be checked vigorously as it undermines the democratic and inclusive foundation of our societies. Okay, so, yeah. So, amongst the strategies is to understand that the resurgence of religious identity, ideology, and politics is a concerted effort by certain groups, is something that we need to be operating from, and to understand that though espousing religion, the economics and politics of such regimes are not based on compassion, social justice, equality, and equity, but rather on power and privilege of the few over the many, as is seen in all theocratic states. To be cognizant that this taking over of power will result in the whittling down of diversity, inclusivity, pluralism, and secularism of our laws and societies. And as Dr. Jaime said, to engage in solidarity politics with other groups likewise affected, and to understand the loss of rights for any one group will result in the loss of rights for all of us. And to re-articulate our agenda with clarity and evidence. Okay, so this is a cartoon by a feminist Egyptian cartoonist, which says that, my sail will never be defeated. So we have to all work together in order to kind of overcome, even though the waves of fundamentalism seem to be very powerful and very forceful. Thank you.
Suprabhatam. Thank you so much to Dr. Sundari and the Center for this invitation. I've been reading and even writing a little bit about Kerala for so many years, and this is my first time here, so it really is an honor to be with you.